Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Hari Govinda, for reading the Mangalacharan. We are reading the Srimad Bhagavatam. We are on Canto 1, Chapter 14. Chapter 14 is titled The Disappearance of Lord Krishna, and the text for today is text 9.
Okay, Mataji, I'm just opening it, reading it. Hare Krishna.
Krishna.
Yasmanna sampado rajyam dhara prana kulam praja asan sapatna vijayo lokascha yad anugrahat. Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Hare Krishna.
So, should I continue on the word to word?
Prabhuji, would you like us to read the word-to-word translation and purport?
Yeah.
Okay. Yasmat, from whom, Naha, our, Sampadaha, opulence, Rajyam, kingdom, Dharaha, good wives, Prana, existence of life, Kulam, destiny, Praja, subjects, Asan, have become possible, Saptana, competitors, Vijaya, conquering, Loka, further accommodation in higher planets, Cha, and Yat, by whose, Anugrahat, by the mercy of. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. From him only all our kingly opulence, good wives, lives, progeny, control over our subjects, victory over our enemies, and future accommodation in higher planets have become possible. All this is due to his causeless mercy upon us. Purport. Material prosperity consists of good wife, good home, sufficient land, good children, aristocratic family relations, victory over competitors, and by pious work, attainment of accommodations in higher celestial planets for better facilities of material amenities. These facilities are earned not only by one's hard manual labor or by unfair means, but by the mercy of the Supreme Lord. Prosperity earned by one's personal endeavor also depends on the mercy of the Lord. Personal labor must be there in addition to the Lord's benediction, but without the Lord's benediction, no one is successful simply by personal labor. The modernized man of Kali Yuga believes in personal endeavor and denies the benediction of the Supreme Lord. Even a great sannyasi of India delivered speeches in Chicago protesting the benediction of Supreme Lord. But as far as Vedic Shastras are concerned, as we find in the pages of Srimad Bhagavatam, the ultimate sanction for all success rests in the hands of the Supreme Lord. Maharaj Yudhishthir admits this truth is in his personal success, and it behooves one to follow in the footsteps of the great king and devotee of the Lord to make life a full success. If one could achieve success without the sanction of the Lord, then no medical practitioner would fail to cure a patient. Despite the most advanced treatment of the suffering patient by the most up-to-date medical practitioner, there is death, and even in the most hopeless case, without medical treatment, a patient is cured astonishingly. Therefore, the conclusion is that God's sanctions is the immediate cause for all happenings, good or bad. Any successful man should feel grateful to the Lord for all he has achieved. Hare Krishna. Hand over to you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Mataji. Thank you, Mataji. Thank you to our Govinda Prabhuji for reading the shlokas so nicely and the Mangalacharan. So before we get into the verse, let us do a quick recap. So in the last chapter, we heard about Vidura coming back to Hastinapur. And when he came back, obviously many things happened. All the palace vasis were really looking forward to spending time with Vidura. And one thing that Yudhishthira Maharaj took the advantage or the opportunity is to inquire about his pilgrim, and specifically about his pilgrim in connection to Krishna and Dwarka, right? So we've had a personality, Vidura, who had gone to Dwarka, who had spent time with Krishna, and Yudhishthira Maharaj had inquired about him. And then obviously we know that Vidura stayed in the palace to kind of convince Dhritarashtra to leave the palace because of his age, because of all the different things that have gone on, and ultimately it was time for him to renounce family life and move on. And when Yudhishthira Maharaj found out that, oh, where are my uncle and aunts? I can't find them. He goes to Sanjaya, and Sanjaya is also perplexed because he himself doesn't know. And then Narad Muni comes onto the scene, and Narad Muni explains what's happening and how Yudhishthira Maharaj should take it. And then at the end, we see that, at the end of the last chapter, we see that Dhritarashtra has basically, his body has burnt up, and Gandhari has basically joined the fire. She's also given up her life as a chaste woman of the time. And on the other side, we saw that Vidura left that site and he went on another pilgrimage. And then we switch over to chapter 14, which, as Kritika Mataji mentioned, is titled The Disappearance of Lord Krishna. In the last chapter, we had Vidura coming back from a pilgrimage, coming back from Dwarka. And this chapter, we start with not Arjun in Dwarka, but we're starting off by a small narration leading up to Yudhishthira Maharaj's conversation, which comes from the fact that Arjun was in Dwarka. He had spent a long time away from Hastinapur, right? Many months had passed, are the terms that were used. And Yudhishthira Maharaj is a bit concerned. He's concerned because it's been such a long time and Arjun hasn't come back. And to add to that concern, he's seeing so many inauspicious omens, so many inauspicious things going on in the palace, around the palace, in the air, so many different things going on. And then from text 6, we see that Yudhishthira Maharaj is having a conversation with Bhima now, Bhima being his brother, about what's been going on, about Arjun and the situation. And in text 8, the last verse that would have been read yesterday, is Yudhishthira Maharaj questioning about, okay, all this inauspicious stuff is happening. Is the Lord planning to leave? Is he planning to quit his earthly pastimes? And that's when we arrive to today's verse, where we see Yudhishthira Maharaj is praising and glorifying and appreciating what the Lord has given to them, the Lord's mercy benedicted on them. And interestingly, as a devotee, what do we usually expect him to do? We expect him to appreciate the spiritual stuff that Krishna has given, the transcendental knowledge, the transcendental association. But here, he's appreciating things like kingly opulences, good wives, live progeny, so many material things. In the Shikshashtakam, in verse 4, we recite, Na dhanam na janam na sundarim. Oh my Lord, I do not want material followers. I do not want materialistic wealth. I do not want a good wife, a good, beautiful wife. Why? Because these things detract one from devotional service. And yet here is Yudhishthira Maharaj praising and appreciating and glorifying the Lord for giving all these things. So how could he appreciate these, which when we recite the Shikshashtakam, when we read the literatures, are things that take us away from the Lord? What Yudhishthira Maharaj is understanding here is the essence of what Yukta Vairagya actually means. Yukta Vairagya is that utilization of everything for the service of the Lord. It's the real purpose of renunciation. Sometimes we think renunciation is about just giving things up. But actually, renunciation is about giving up the desire to have it for myself. It's about doing things because it will please the Lord, using things for the pleasure of the Lord. Yudhishthira Maharaj didn't use any of these things that he's glorifying and that he's appreciating that he's received from the Lord for himself. He used every one of them as a way to serve Krishna. He used everyone in a way to offer either directly or indirectly service to the Lord. But more importantly, in context of the verse, Yudhishthira Maharaj, we can see, had Divya Gyan, right? He had transcendental knowledge. He had transcendental understanding. We could say he had Divya Chakshush. He had the transcendental vision, the divine vision of wisdom. Why? Because he understood, as it says in the last sentence of the translation, all this is due to his causeless mercy upon us. He understood that it wasn't because of his own endeavors that he achieved any of these things. It was because of the mercy of the Lord. In the world today, we have such a booming industry in terms of the motivational books, the motivational speeches, right? We have books like Manifest Your Desire, The Law of Attraction, The Secret, Think and Grow Rich, or Power of Positive Thinking. So many different motivational books, motivational speeches that we have. They're all aimed at manifesting our desires by dreaming them, by constantly meditating on them, by thinking about them, and then ultimately really striving, really doing something to achieve those endeavors. And yet we see that so many people who read the books still will never achieve the success that the books claim that they'll achieve, right? For every one of these books that sold, how many people are actually becoming successful? So many motivational speakers talk about this principle of looking at yourself in the mirror, right? Standing in front of the mirror and then going, say something to yourself every day. Say, I can do it, This is going to be the best day I've lived till date. I'm going to get that dream job today. Nobody's going to stop me today, I'm going to achieve my goals today. But what does this achieve? Oftentimes, what it does is, scientifically speaking, it adds some positive affirmations into our life to uplift our mood. It adds some adrenaline to our body to make us feel good, give us that pump that, yes, things are going to go right today. But still, more often than not, it will fall short of achieving what the motivational speaker says that we'll achieve. The motivational speakers, the motivational books promise so many things, and yet we see so many people trying to follow the advice, trying to follow the guidance, and they don't achieve it. And the reality is, oftentimes we can even look at the motivational speakers or the authors themselves, and we see they themselves are not as successful as they make themselves out to be. But from the Bhagavad Gita, we can understand why. We can understand why these motivational books, whilst great, whilst we can learn many things from them, but they don't give the all-encompassing vision of what it takes. From the Bhagavad Gita, we understand that what these books are missing is that connection back to the divine source, that connection back to Krishna. Adishtanam tatha karta karanam cha prithag vidham Vividhascha pritak cheshta devam cheva tripashchamam. This is from Bhagavad Gita 18:14. Translation. The place of action, the body, the performer, the various senses, the many different kinds of endeavor, and ultimately the supersoul. These are the 5 factors of action. So I'll repeat them. The place of action, the performer, the various senses, the many different kinds of endeavor, and ultimately the supersoul. When we look at the modern motivational speakers or the modern motivational books, they primarily focus, in fact, all of them focus on the material factors of action, right? They focus on the body, they focus on the performer or the desire. They focus on the senses in terms of the ability to do something, and they focus on the endeavor itself. But what they miss is the last line of the verse. Devam Jevatra Paschamam. Right? They miss the Paschamam, the 5th factor, which is the supersoul. We as the spirit soul, the performer, right, the desirer of action, right? And in order to carry out the desires that we have or the actions that we have in the material world, we require a means to be able to do it, a body to be able to do it, a place, an opportunity to be able to carry the desire out. And how do we carry the desires out? Through instruments. And that instrument is our senses. The fact that I can touch, I can smell, they're instruments to be able to carry out those desires. But for every action, we also require some endeavor. Right? That's the 4th factor. But even if all of these things are in place, we still require the sanction or the approval of the supersoul. And if we look at a practical example, right? I'm the soul, right? I can't point physically at the soul apart from just pointing in the region of the heart, but I'm the soul, right? The Atma, or the Karta in terms of the desirer. And I have this body to be able to utilize to have the facility or the opportunity to act out my desires. And with it, I have the ability to touch, I have the ability to do different things, smell, see. And with that, I also have I can also have the endeavor, right? I can have the endeavor to pick up this phone, say, right? I can have the endeavor to pick up this water bottle, and I can do these things. But I still require the Lord's sanction to be able to do these things. Now imagine I have the desire to pick up this table that the laptop is on. Well, I'm not strong enough to lift the table up. Or about the house. I can definitely not lift the house up. I can have the body, I can have the desire, I can have the endeavor, but I just won't be able to do it. Even if I go to the gym to lift the table, to say, okay, you know what, I'm going to endeavor to lift the table up. How do I endeavor to lift the table up? Well, in order to lift the table up, I need more muscle mass. I need to be able to get stronger. So I'm going to go to the gym, I'm going to lift weights for a year, and then after a year, I'll come back and I'll lift it. Well, even then, I'm sanction of the Lord, because what if I go to the gym religiously every day and I'm growing muscle, but then on one day, I'm in the gym, I'm lifting weights, and a machine falls on top of me, breaks my arms. And the doctor says, you'll never lift any weights again. And then we have many cases where people are like, no, lifting weights, building muscle is the only thing I know. So I'm still going to try and do it. How many of them will achieve? How many of them will miss out? So even when we're trying to go for these endeavors, something could happen if the Lord doesn't want us to be able to achieve it. And in the same way, we can test the super soul's presence, the super soul's sanction in all areas of our life, basically. The example that Prabhupada gives in his purport is how a doctor sets out to save patients, but we can see that patients don't always survive. You could have the best doctor. You could have the best doctor with the best facilities. You can have the best doctor with the best facilities in the best hospital. You could have the best doctor with the best facilities in the best hospital with the best team. You could have all of those things and have the most opportune patient whose body is just built to always recover, right? No matter what they go through, they always recover quickly. But still, the doctor can and oftentimes will not be able to save the patient. I did some research on statistics. In England, about 500,000 people died last year, right? And that's the average, like 500,000 people die each year in England. Of those, half of them, meaning 250,000, die in hospitals. That's 50% of those that die, they die in hospitals. A hospital is a place where we go to recover, where we go to get better. And yet, half of the people who die in hospitals. Now, that's a statistic worth thinking about. You go to a hospital to get better, but half the people who are going in a life-threatening situation, right? Or sorry, half the people who are in a life-threatening situation die in a hospital. So they went to a hospital ready to die or ready to come, be saved, but half of them don't get saved. A doctor's occupation, critical Bhaja on the call, she's on camera. But I don't know if you do operations actually, but yeah, like half the people, okay, yeah, Mataji doesn't do operations, so it's okay to say this. But half it's a statistic worth really thinking about. It's like we go to hospitals, we go to doctors to get saved, to get cured, but half the people who died in England died in a hospital surrounded by those who supposedly should be able to help them. Okay, let's take a less sort of extreme, let's turn away from death for now. Let's go to something like education, right? Okay, many people, many youngsters have exams coming up, like, okay, for a month, I'm going to be religious. I'm not going to look at TV. I'm not going to play games. I'm just going to come home from school, study, I'll stay behind for an extra hour with the teacher every day and study. I'll memorize the textbook. I'll go through all the past papers. Every conversation I'll have, I'll make sure I bring up a math equation or a scientific formula into it. And then exam day comes. You're looking at the paper, you're looking at the first question. And then you gulp. And then you look around, you see everybody squibbling away, and you just look at the first question and thinking, I should know this answer. But I don't know it. And then you're thinking, but I memorized the textbook. I went through all this studying. My mind's just gone blank. Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita says, Matasmitir Gyanam Apohanamcha. Krishna is the one that gives us remembrance, knowledge, forgetfulness. So again, without Krishna's sanction, we can put all that effort into studying. If Krishna doesn't want us to, I don't know, pass the exam or be comfortable in the exam or whatever it is, it won't happen. Or we can look at entrepreneurship, right? Finance. I mean, everybody loves money, right? You have those who want to be entrepreneurs, start their own business. They find a gap in the market. That's one of the top things that people say, that those who are trying to build their own business, find a gap in the market, make it your niche, make it your thing. Be the one to own the idea, be the one to own that space before anyone else does. You try, you're endeavoring, you put all your capital in it, you put all your energy in it, you quit your job. Instead of working 30, 40 hours a week, you're starting to work 70, 80 hours a week, purely because you have this idea that you want to manifest, that you think you'll become rich off of. A year goes by, 2 years goes by. And then you're thinking, Nobody's buying it. I found a gap in the market that nobody really cares about. So you decide, okay, you know what? I'll let it go. You know what? This wasn't for me. I tried, failed, doesn't matter. There's nobody, it's hopeless, you know, this gap in the market is hopeless. Nobody cares about it. So you quit your business, you shut it down, you start taking up you're trying to find a normal job again. And 2-3 months later, newsflash. Brand new business is booming on the stock market. They found a gap in the market. And what was that gap? The same gap that you were trying to fill. And then you start watching the interview. It's like, and then the person goes, yeah, you know, we had this idea. We saw that nobody else was doing this in the market. So we thought, we'll give it a shot. And, you know, we became successful. All it takes is to find the gap in the market. So if you want to be successful, go and find the gap in the market, start your own business, and you'll boom. And then you're thinking, but I own that space. Nobody did it. Nobody took the gap. When I was there, nobody was taking up my offers. But this person gets to get rich. Again, why is it that some companies, Tesla, Apple, become big, become rich off of the gap in the market, but those who tried before them didn't? Was Tesla the first electric car manufacturer? No. Was Apple the first company to break away from Windows? No. And yet, why are they the ones that boom? And yet, these other companies that started before them to break the status quo, as they say, didn't? Because the sanction of the Lord wasn't there. When we look at the material world with the material consciousness, we can see that just hard work, just endeavor doesn't guarantee success. Otherwise, if it did, then all the effort that these people put in should have guaranteed success. And it's ludicrous to assume that we can manifest what we want, or that the universe's energy will act in a way to give us what we desire. Because without acknowledging the mercy, the presence, the sanction, the approval of the Lord, then success and failure for those who work hard actually can't be explained. If we don't acknowledge the Lord's presence, we can't explain the success and the failure of those who work hard. If everybody who worked hard became successful, then you could argue against it. But the fact that two people can work hard in the same way, with the same hours, with the same effort, one can achieve success, the other will fail. You can't, materially, you can't logically explain that. At this point, one might ask, well, okay, well, if everything's about the Lord's sanction, then why should I bother doing anything in the first place? Why should I bother putting some endeavor in the first place? If ultimately, whether I endeavor or don't endeavor, it all depends on Krishna, then why should I do anything? Yeah, it's true that ultimately everything is sanctioned or happens by the will of the Lord. But if we're thinking that by abstaining from activity, by abstaining from the endeavor, we're actually going away from that concept, then that's not true. In simple terms, we can see that if we're driving along a road and then we come across a cross junction, right? Generally, we think we have two options. We either go left or we go right. But actually, there's also a third option. And that third option is that we can stay where we are. But the thing is that if Krishna doesn't want us to stay where we are, or if the Krishna wants us to go in a certain direction, he'll do things to make that happen. For example, if you're in that car and you're like, I'm at a junction, you know what? I'm not going to go left. I'm not going to go right. I'm just going to stay here. You might have some crazy driver behind you that is like, why is this person not moving? And instead of just going around you, they might be so crazy. They're like, you know what? I'm just going to cause hell for this person in front of me. I'm just going to start tailgating and pushing their car forward so that they're forced to go left or right. I've seen that happen once before, actually, in America. So sometimes we think that we won't do anything, and that's you know, an option also, and that's me abstaining from any options. But actually that's an option in itself. But in all three cases, the Lord's sanction is required, right? But then generally, if we think about it, then if we want to achieve anything, then we have to endeavor to do something. Right? That's a standard thing that we can understand. And if and ultimately what we can see is that Krishna is there as the one who gives the stamps on the documents, right? If we have certain papers, certain forms to fill out, and we need approval from someone, then we have to do the hard work of filling the forms out, printing the forms out, filling the forms out, and going and giving it to the person who's going to stamp it. Krishna's sitting there waiting with a stamp, right? We can picture this. Krishna's there waiting for the stamp, waiting for us to bring the papers to him, and then he'll look through the papers and go, yeah, that action is fine. Yep, that one's fine. Oh, no, sorry, this one's rejected. Right? That's ultimately what Krishna does. But we still have to do the hard work to get these papers in check, bring the papers to the person who's going to stamp them. So that endeavor is required, as well as Krishna's sanction will ultimately be the final deciding factor. It will be the final judgment of the action, whether that action is allowed or not. And we have a prime example in Damodar Leela where this takes place, where you've got Yashodama who's giving that personal endeavor, and then ultimately Yashodama is not able to tie Krishna until and unless Krishna wants to be tied, until and unless Krishna stamps that, yes, you know, now Yashodama, you have tried so much, you have expressed so much love, you've let out so many sweat water droplets. Now, you know, you've filled the bucket. Now you're allowed. Now I'll stamp the paper for you. And then she attained that success of binding Krishna. So let's now go to devotee circles. Right? As devotees, we have this general knowledge, at least theoretical. Many of us will probably be realized knowledge also, that there is that Krishna factor in life, that there is that idea that, yes, Krishna is the one that sanctions things. But still, so many times we act, think, and live in ignorance of that. Even though we know that someone's name, someone's fame, someone's success, someone's beauty, someone's strength is all by the mercy of the Lord, even as devotees, we still sometimes become envious, jealous, right? Fault-finding. We start comparing ourselves with them. And sometimes we even start comparing this person with that person, that only if this person had a little bit of this, they'd be so much more like that person. Within devotee circles, we sometimes will go and start finding faults and going like, oh, look at that devotee. He's giving class, this Bhaja Govinda Das, he's giving class, but he can't even recite Sanskrit shlokas properly. He shouldn't be giving class. Or we go to the temple and we see the temple commander. He's getting praised so nicely. He's getting so much glorification for the service he's doing. And then we start thinking, getting all this, but why am I not getting it? Why did that devotee get temple commander? What's wrong with me? Like I can do everything he does. And sometimes we even go purely on the material situation. We see somebody coming in a car, in a brand new Tesla X or a Mercedes-Benz car with branded sunglasses, and we're like, he's a devotee, but look at him. He's showing off his car. He's showing off all his, you know, clothes and everything. Not really a devotee. He's just pretending to be a devotee, coming with tilak, but coming in all these sorts of expensive clothes and cars. When we do these things, we can understand that we're guilty of many things, right? Fault finding, enviousness towards the Lord, and even presenting our own material flaws where we've got our own desires, right? Material desires that we just transposing on others. But on another level, we can actually see and say that what we're saying here is that we don't agree with the Lord's mercy. that he's bestowed on others. What we're saying is that in some way, we don't agree or think that Krishna knows how to award benedictions to people. Because we're saying that this person doesn't actually deserve this, in my eyes. Krishna, why did you give this to him? He doesn't deserve it. But you gave it. Are you sure, Krishna, you know what you're doing? But if we really acknowledge Krishna as a super soul, as the one who sanctions the activities, if we really acknowledge the Krishna Kripa, the mercy that is required for any activity, right? The mercy that is the cause of any activity or anything that someone achieves in life, then we can actually have better appreciation, better respect, better trust in the Lord's plan for what he's given to us and to others. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Samoham sarvabhuteshu. Krishna is not partial to anyone. And that applies to devotees, to non-devotees, and even those non-devotees who are atheistic, who don't believe in God. He's not partial to them, to any of them, to any of us. So Krishna's mercy, Krishna's benediction, Krishna's sanction is available for everyone. But a devotee is more fortunate than the non-devotee when it comes to the endeavor, when it comes to the position of that sanction. When a non-devotee endeavors for something, they're usually endeavoring for their own sense gratification or for the extended sense gratification of the family, the town, the country, something like that. And so the Lord's sanction is then based on karma and desire. Does that person have the karma for it? Does that person have the desire for it? If yes, then tick. If no, then yeah. Sorry, not this time. But when a devotee endeavors for something, when the motive behind the devotee to endeavor for something is to serve the Lord, then the Lord doesn't just look at the karma or the desire. The Lord starts looking at the fact that the desire is not just a desire, it's a desire to do something for me. It's to do something for the Lord. It's to do something to serve and please me. And so the Lord starts looking at the sincerity of that desire to serve. And with it, he looks at the ability and karma and the desire. We can see in Prabhupada's life that sometimes he would endeavor for something and he'd get it straight away. You know, it'd be like, you just turn around and Prabhupada's just achieved whatever he set out to achieve. But sometimes we see Prabhupada endeavors for something and he's putting blood, sweat, and tears in it for years on end to ultimately achieve something. And then yet again, we see the other extreme where Prabhupada endeavors for something and at the first sign of difficulty, he's like, no more, right? We tried, Krishna doesn't want it. We have all three cases in Prabhupada's Lilamrita. So the art of being a devotee is to navigate our life in a way that we're always searching for the mercy of the Lord. We're always endeavoring in a way to think about how can I maximize my service to the Lord? But at the same time, always being ready for whatever outcome may come. As devotees, we're not meant to be attached to the success or the failure of the endeavor. We're meant to be attached to aligning to the will, to the desire of the Lord. When a materialist endeavors for something, their cake, what they're really prizing after, is the fruits of that endeavor. It's that, yes, I got what I set out to achieve. And they may be a bit pious and there might be a bit of God consciousness and they're like, oh yeah, Krishna gave it to me. God gave it to me. The higher source, the divine gave it to me. And that's like the cherry on top for a materialist. The main goal is to achieve what they set out to achieve. But the fact that they appreciate that God gave it to them, or maybe the fact that it somehow aligned with God's will, that's like the cherry on top for them. But for a devotee, the main cake is not the fact that we achieved what we set out to achieve. The main cake is the fact that Krishna was pleased with that endeavor. That our sincerity was purely in the direction of pleasing Krishna and in serving Krishna. And if the outcome of that endeavor happens to be aligned with what we set out to achieve, that's the cherry on top for a devotee. I endeavored for this. Krishna's happy that I endeavored because it was for him. But the fact that it also worked out the way I planned it to be is the cherry on top. Versus the materialist who is, I'm setting out for this. I got what I want. Yes. Oh, Krishna's pleased. That's good. But yes, I got what I wanted. That's ultimately the kind of the bread and butter difference between the two. So as devotees, when we look at our endeavors, when we look at our direction of service, then we can start becoming a bit more detached about the outcome of the endeavor and start getting more attached to the idea that whatever I get is by the mercy and the sanction of the Lord. Whatever I'm endeavoring for, let me just increase my sincerity of doing it 100% for the Lord, 0% for me. Most of us right now will be mixed. Our endeavors will be mixed. It's a bit for me, it's a bit for him. But the more we increase that sincerity to be 100% for Krishna, the more Krishna will be pleased. The more we get to enjoy the whole cake. And then the fact that we get enjoyment out of it also by the fact that we got the fruits of what we endeavored for will be the cherry on top. We get to enjoy that extra little bit of flavor. So I'll summarize. There's 5 main things that we kind of talked about, right? So one is how in this verse, Yudhishthira Maharaj is appreciating and acknowledging how everything he's got, everything that the Pandavas have got in terms of their material prosperity is by the mercy of the Lord. And then we talked about how there's this self-development industry in the material world today, which focuses on this notion of you can achieve whatever you set out to achieve. Whatever you dream, you can achieve that. But what they lack is the understanding of the third point, which is the 5 factors of action. They lack the understanding that there is not just 4 factors, but there's 5 factors. The super soul is also involved. Then we spoke about how, as devotees, even though theoretically we understand that everything we get is from the mercy of the Lord or the sanction of the Lord, sometimes and oftentimes we will forget that. And we start comparing, we start fault finding, we start thinking that having this subconscious mentality that Krishna doesn't know what he's doing. And then we ended with the idea that real success for a devotee is not in achieving what we set out to achieve, but it's in achieving a smile on Krishna's face because of the sincerity that we set out to achieve those endeavors. Salenda, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Shubhat ki jai.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you so much for this class and explaining it in practical terms. I really enjoyed it, and I like the example of the cake and the icing on the top. That put everything in so much of perspective. It's the same thing. It's the same cake. It's the same icing on the top, but it's just your intention. So thank you very much for simplifying this topic so nicely. Are there any questions or comments from the group? Prabhuji, you have really simplified it so much. No one has any doubts. Any comments?
Hare
Please.
Krishna Mataji. Hare Krishna Mataji, I have a question.
Sure, Mataji. Go ahead.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you so much for the class. I know you were mentioning about doing things in terms of service for Krishna, but as many devotees may experience, and of course myself, sometimes when we set out to do service in a certain way or in a particular way and it doesn't work out, of course that's because it's more for myself and not for Krishna, but there's always that element of feeling like disheartened. So how do we sort of try and make those baby steps so then we can become more sincere and feel less disheartened and feel less it's more rather than me?
Yeah, no, thank you, Mataji, for a wonderful question. Yeah, it's true. Even as devotees, when we're sincerely trying to do service for Krishna and for the devotees, sometimes we will face those failures, so-called failures in the service. One thing I'll clarify before I go into answering the question is that it's not that we only achieve so-called failure in our services because it's for us and not for Krishna. Sometimes Krishna will also not want you to succeed in that. If you look at Yashodhama's pastime, how long did Yashodhama go? It's described from morning to dusk, right? She spent almost a whole day just trying to tie a little boy, right? Trying to get ropes from not just her house, but from every house that she could cover from the neighborhood. But she spent a whole day to try and bind him, right? How many of us would spend that long trying to bind someone or something, right? Nobody practically, right? After an hour, we'll be like, whatever, give up. So it's not that Krishna will, it's not that success will come if we're 100% sincere about something and Krishna will then give it to us because it's for Krishna. Sometimes Krishna might say, I don't actually want it this way. Yeah, it's all for me. I actually don't want it this way, I want it a different way. So I just wanted to clarify that. In terms of this idea, this notion of being disheartened, yeah, it's, I mean, truth be told, it's something that even I experience, right? All of us experience, even senior devotees experience that. But the baby steps to moving forward from them is to reflect on that point that you mentioned, is how much of it was for Krishna, how much of it was for me. Because when we're reflecting on that, and this is just one of many ideas, I'm sure the devotees have their own sort of personal experiences with this. But when we reflect on it, we can then appreciate how much of it worked, because everything that we endeavor for, there's some elements that work in it. There's something that works in it. It just might not achieve, like, go all the way. Sometimes it will be 10% of the endeavor, sometimes it will be 80%, sometimes it will just be that 95%. And that small little thing, because one thing didn't work out, the service failed, right? In broad terms. But if we just look at introspect on how much of it was my desire to serve versus my desire to be, I don't know, out in front of the community of devotees looking like I'm serving, or whatever it may be, that ulterior, then we can attribute the success to the fact that there was sincerity in the desire, and Krishna saw that much sincerity. And the other part, that part that we know was really for us, we'd actually be able to pick out that actually this little thing happened here, and therefore it didn't work out because that was more for me than for Krishna. That's one thing that comes up. Another thing could be is that I guess this goes to something that Dimple Mataji had asked about 2 weeks ago, the last time I gave class on this Sangha, is that we do, because we're conditioned, we do require that encouragement, that inspiration, that enjoyment in the journey. There's nothing wrong in that, right? We require it because Krishna also desires enjoyment. We're parts and parcels of Krishna, so we also have that tendency to want to enjoy. And right now, our enjoyment comes from not purely in serving Krishna, it comes from also playing a part in our conditionings. But the idea is that let's try and be in services that push us, but also where we're surrounded by devotees, or the service itself is something that we want to be doing, something that either aligns with our nature or something that we enjoy just doing. For example, I like reading, right? So services that encourage me to read more, say giving classes or writing books, or I don't know, editing books or whatever it may be, something related to reading and acquiring knowledge, that inspires me, that encourages me. I like doing it. And so I'll have my other services that I don't like so much, but I do it because it pushes me, encourages me, it purifies me. But I'll also make sure that I dedicate a good amount of time, enough that I need, to do services that encourage the aspects of my service that are inspiring to me. And for each of us, that's different, right? For somebody, the only thing they might enjoy in Krishna consciousness is kirtan. That's the only thing they enjoy. But they only need half an hour of kirtan a week to get them through the week of endless service. That's nice for them. Somebody else might be somebody who really likes spending time with devotees, just talking, not necessarily directly Krishna Katha, but talking about the service, talking about temples, talking about deities, all these different things. And you know what? They're so much of a people person that they need at least 2 hours a day doing it. Take that 2 hours a day. Find devotees that can give you the time to do that. Don't just force yourself on it. You know what? Bhaja Govinda told me 2 hours a day, you know, come, I'm holding your hand, you have to talk to me about it now. No, find devotees that can also do that, right? But it's like, we all have our own needs in service to keep us going in service. And if we find the right balance, then the so-called failures in one service can still be overlooked by the inspiration we're getting in this other service. And my point with one other thing is that oftentimes we do see devotees, not necessarily at the manor because there's so much at the manor, but oftentimes we do see devotees get involved with either just one service, and like, this is my service, Prabhu, nothing else. Or we see the flip side where they get involved in so many services that they don't have a main service, and then they're just stretched everywhere. But what we need to be intelligent and smart about it and be like, I can't just have one service, because either that service will only push me or will only be inspiring for me, and it won't make me grow in other areas. And by having too many, we're just spreading ourselves thin, and we're not actually being able to reflect and inspire ourselves in going deeper in certain services. Because you know what? I really like deity service. I like cleaning the paraphernalia. I want to explore it more. Well, sorry, you've got 50 other services you're doing. You can't explore it more. So then you don't get the opportunity to find the inspiration that you need. So we need a good balance. We need a few services. And, you know, you can have a few core services that you're doing regularly, one main service, a few additional services, and then ad hoc, you could do other services. But make sure you have a variety enough that sustains your Krishna consciousness. As devotees, we love saying, Prabhu, do some more service. Mataji, you know, for Krishna, take an extra service on. But we do have to be intelligent on it. I'm probably saying things that other devotees won't say, but yeah, as devotees, we have to learn to say yes every time, and also learn to say no sometimes. It's just about finding. I'm expecting a no to my next service. So yeah, Mayuri Mataji does some service for the bhakti. So
Thank you, Prabhu, for the answer. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, thank you very much. Are there any other questions or comments? We have 2 more minutes. If there are no more questions, I'll hand over to Path Prabhu. Hare Krishna, Prabhu, are you around, are you able to end this session?
Yeah, Hare Krishna. Yes, yes, Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. His Grace Prabhuji Govindam Prabhuji. So giving very nice and simplified Bhagavad session about Yudhishthira Maharaj and other things, also very giving good answers, nice answers of the Mata's question, the service of the Lord and everything. So it is a very nice class. So I think there is no other questions and doubt. I told and thank you very much, Prabhuji, for your class. Also, thanks all the devotee who joining here. I request all the devotee, please unmute yourself and chant Hare Krishna mantra for glorification of His Grace, Bhaja Govindam Prabhuji. Please join. Hare Krishna, Hare
Krishna, 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Bhakta Kalpa Tarubhyasya
Kripa Sindhubhyeva Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai. His Grace Bhaja Govindam Prabhuji ki jai.
Jai. Iskon Eldoret ki jai.
Jai. Hare Krishna.
Hare
Thank you,
Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Thank you for an excellent class. Hare Krishna.